Origami plate how-to. So if you are watching this video, I'm assuming you have already made your template. And if you have not, there is a separate video on making your template shape. So whatever kind of shape you want to make is your starting point. And then figuring out where your overlaps are going to be, marking that, and then being at the point where you have a slab of clay that you've pulled. I hand pulled this piece, and it's a nice even thickness, and the thickness is, let's see, right here, which is 1/4 of an inch, okay? You can be a little thicker than that, especially if you're at home and you're pulling a slab by hand. They can be difficult to get them really even. So a little more than 1/4 of an inch, but it should not be as thick as 1/2 inch. That will just be really heavy and you won't like your piece nearly as much. Something that's a little bit thicker than 1/2 centimeter. 1/2 centimeter is probably as thin as I would possibly go, because then it will be too fragile. This one's almost 1 centimeter thick, okay? So, thickness of piece. Tools that you need: your template, your fettling knife, a craft stick, especially if you cut the tip. You can do this with your wooden knife. I don't know where mine is. But it is nice if you have the super thin craft stick. It works really well. And I cut an angle, and then I cut the tip off. So that's a handy shape to have. Scoring tool, we've got our toothpick tools, and your metal rib. I also have a paintbrush nearby just for applying water to a specific area. Notice what I don't have is this guy. You don't need your sponge. Don't use your sponge. And a ruler, very helpful, because you want to have straight lines. So, get my tools out of the way. I also have a little bowl of water here for making my slip. And I'm going to start by cutting out my platter, or my plate. So, because I hand pulled this slab, I didn't use a rolling pin, I didn't use a slab roller. I sort of like to feel over the surface of my slab and find the most even, flat. There's no wobbles or kind of a roller coaster ride on the piece. I have my tape here from when I was checking my overlap, but I'm going to tuck it out of the way at the moment. Okay, and then I'm going to set my ruler down on the outline and my fettling knife that hopefully has a clean blade, and straight in and straight towards you. Now I'm not working on a board, and I don't want to pick this slab up a whole bunch and move it around, because I don't want to flex it in lots of different directions. I want to keep it as flat as possible, as long as possible. Tape in my way here. I would normally say, if you're on a board, then just move your board so you're not doing all these awkward directions. Okay. I just don't want to move the clay, like I said. It's on the table, and I don't want to flex it too much. So I'm going to get rid of all of my surplus, bag that back up so it doesn't dry out while you're working. Bag down here. Okay, and then I've got my nice neat square. If you get some wobble or some things that you need to clean up, it's a great time to do that. You can do it with your metal rib. If you really got away from the ruler, you can come back and lay your ruler down and your fettling knife. And even there, that's the side I think I had the hardest time with. The tape that was kind of in my way. So if I want to recut just a little bit of clay and make it really smooth. But the trick with that is don't keep on doing it. I mean, pretty soon you're going to end up with no square left or no clay left, okay? So there's my slab. Then I've got my cuts, and I have how far I want to overlap. And in my case, I'm going to overlap over to this line so that the point touches this line that I've drawn. You could do your cuts and your turns and twists however you like. You do not have to do what I have here at all. You could have cuts coming in from the corners. Remember, you have a no cut zone of 3 inches in the center so that your piece is going to sit nice and flat on the table. It needs to have this area kind of set aside as the place that's going to sit flat. So I have these lines here that I'm going to cut. So again, ruler. And my students know I'm not a ruler kind of person. I tend to just eyeball. So this project gets me a little bit out of my comfort zone. And again, if I was on a board, I would turn my piece. I would not be making cuts in awkward directions. But for the sake of time and my setup here, I'm going this way. Again, I have a piece of tape in my way. So I'm using the ruler to keep me really straight. And I personally, I just pulled this one and felt very strange pulling it off the edge, because that is something I wouldn't normally do. I wasn't thinking it through. I would say you want to make your cut from the outside in to the center and then remove, so that you don't accidentally take a chunk of clay off with you, okay? And then I also want to mark where my overlaps are going to be. So now I have my basic kind of cuts, and now I need to mark where I'm going to be scoring and slipping. So this piece is going to overlap onto that piece, and I'm going to use, pretty much anything works. I'm going to grab a pencil and pressing through my template just enough to leave an impression on the slab of clay itself. I'm going to pull each one of these tabs to where I'm going to be attaching the clay, and I'm marking out where I need to score and slip so that I can attach these two pieces to one another and have a really clean job of it. So I'm just holding the flap where it's eventually going to be attached and drawing a line. Okay, you guys probably can't see it very well on the camera, but I've got little areas here, and that's where I'm going to go in with my scoring tool, my poor beat up scoring tool, and score. And try not to sort of mess up the other parts. I'm going to say also this slab is a fresh slab. This is very soft clay. This is not leather hard. It has just been made. You can let your clay set for a time, but I would keep it wrapped while it's set. So you could get to a stage of soft leather hard, and this would work, but you don't want this to be very firm. You need the flexibility of the clay, so you need to work with it when it's on the softer side. I'm also making this from a template that's no larger than a piece of paper. So if I was making something really large, a platter versus a plate or a bowl, then I would need it to set longer, because otherwise it would be so much surface area that if it's too flexible, it would be kind of floppy and give me a problem. So you can see now where I've scored, where this piece is going to fold over and set on top of that piece. Now I need to do the back side as well. So I'm going to carefully lift, and I don't want to peel up the corners and bend a whole lot. So I like to use my metal rib like it's a spatula, kind of release and get my hands under, trying to keep my clay as flat as possible and turn it over, and I kind of whoopsed, but it is what it is. Now I have really deep cuts in my piece. This piece that I made earlier, it's just sort of semi-assembled. These cuts aren't quite as much as long as the other ones are, because this shape is a bit smaller. So when I turn things over and move things around, there's a lot less flexing going on. So I have a piece that's a little more tricky for that as well. So I have this portion scored, but I don't have this portion scored. So I'm actually gonna turn my template over and look at where my overlap is. Actually, do that in reverse. So what I'm looking for is this portion on the underside that I'm marking. So I'm going to mark 1, because this is a little awkward. And that's the part that on my clay, I'm going to line this up so it's fairly accurate. I'll make this little mark where that overlap's going to be, and I'm going to cheat and just turn my template, because it's the same as all of these sides are the same. And I'm just leaving a little impression on the clay so that I can see where I need to prep by scoring. And then the same thing, and go in and score. Trying not to destroy the other little piece of clay. But making sure that when I bind these two pieces together, where the overlaps are, that I'll get a really nice connection. Okay, so again, make sure your scoring is really scoring. You're not just making little neat marks, but you're really disrupting that surface so that the two pieces are going to come together and hold really nice and tight. So this is my underside, so I've got to flip this guy one last time. And trying to be gentle. If you had 2 boards or something like that, that would make life much easier. I don't have that luxury at the moment. So there I am, back to the front. Hopefully not too banged up. If I had my clay resting a little bit longer, then I would be having an easier time too. But like I said, I just pulled this slab. So it is super, super soft. I don't want to mess around with it too much. Okay, so scored, now slip. And that's where my brush comes in handy, my bowl of water. The brush is nice just because you can get just the areas that you need with some slip making going on. Okay, not a ton of water. It's just a fairly big surface area I have here. That's why I'm going back for more. Water, and now I'm going to come back in and score again and create my slip. So we've got this nice gooey surface just ready for making a mess. And now I'm down to my last 2 tools. Okay, I've finished with my fettling knife. I'm done with my scoring tool, my brush, my pencil, and my ruler. And I'm down to these guys. So now the fun begins. I'm gonna lift my piece, and my scored underside is now, I've gotta go all the way to the bottom corner that I've cut and bring those 2 pieces of clay together, make sure it's lined up where I want. I haven't attached anything yet. It's just sitting where I want it to be. And once I'm ready, then I'm gonna press gently but firmly and and consistently pushing all the way down to that bottom portion. I have to be careful though not to squeeze so much that I press this clay together and pancake it out. Again, my clay is very soft, so it would be easy to do that, but I want to get a nice compression between the two slab parts. And then I'm gonna use my craft stick and I'm gonna get right in this little seam and I'm gonna smooth and compress. So that's why it's nice to have a little corner on your tool. You can see where I smushed out my slip here. I can clean that up just a bit. I'm not too worried about making it look very nice right now. It's really about closing that seam so that I have a good connection right there. And then I'm gonna move to the next one and do the same thing. Overlap all the way down to this interior seam, or what you guys can see better on camera is down there. And line it up to what I had drawn, which is right where it's sitting, and then I'm gonna press gently, trying not to press so hard that I end up with finger marks of where I've kind of squished, but nice and firm at the same time, so I have a good connection all the way across that piece. I'm gonna turn here so you can see and get in there with my tool and compress that seam and capture any of the slip or scoring marks that might have sort of squished into that area. And then again, now my piece is, again, it's really soft, so trying to be sort of gentle with it. Overlap, just making sure it's lined up where I want it to be. Press all the way down. Sometimes students forget this part. They focus up here on the bigger, more noticeable area, but you've really got to get all the way down in here. Otherwise, you're going to have a gap that'll pop open later. And once it's compressed and feels pretty well attached, I'm going to go back with my tool and squish this portion out, clean that up a little bit. And then last turn here. Again, overlap, line it up. You don't want to rush any of this. You want to take your time. It's really about being consistent and clean and applying good, even pressure. That's really hard to do when you're distracted and you're looking elsewhere or you're thinking about what's next. So all the steps for this project are outlined in our Google Classroom. So make sure that you have those steps up on a screen somewhere that you can refer to. And then take your time and make sure you smooth all the way down into that very thin part of the seam and the join. Okay? So now it's got the basics of assembly. I've got the connections. The underside is still a mess. The top isn't all clean, but I've closed the seams and I have a lot of cleanup work to do in a bit, but I'm at the beginning here. So I've got to get to the back side. If I turn this over and set it on the table, it's just gonna do all kinds of terrible shape stuff. I'll probably lose these corners and it will start to go into a different direction. And remember, clay has a memory, so whichever way it gets bent, it likes to return that way, so I don't want to bend it out of shape. The interior of my piece has a fairly small kind of center to it, so I'm going to turn this over and put it on a piece that has kind of a narrow center. And I've been using this bowl, but right now, well, actually, that will work. So setting it in there, I can see that it will hold. So it doesn't matter if it's a cup, a bowl, a jar, but something that has, that one is elevated and two has a small enough circumference that it's gonna fit inside your bowl or plate and not reshape it. And then I turn this over and set it right on there and let it hang in space. Again, it's not super large. If this was a platter, then I wouldn't be doing it on such a small form. I would probably have some foam or something like that to support. But you can see my scoring marks and all of this mess that I still need to clean up. So I'm gonna get in there with my altered craft stick and close the seam. And try to keep these edges. And I'm gonna turn the whole bowl. I'm not gonna move my piece any more than I have to. I've had to move this piece quite a bit just because I didn't have it on a board. So if you're working on a board, you should be moving that board a lot more than moving the slab. Clean that up, closing that seam. And you see that I'm always turning it so that I'm drawing the tool towards me, other than this little bit I've been cleaning up. And I'm cleaning it up because it's towards the camera, even though you probably can't see it when I'm doing it, and I can't see it when I'm doing it. So if it was just me sitting here not on camera, I'd probably be doing that right in front of me. But I would be pulling this tool towards me because I have a lot more control than trying to do even this. That wouldn't work very well. But having it across from me and pulling back gives me a lot more control. Okay, so now all my seams are closed, and I don't want to end up handling this piece a whole bunch of back and forth and back and forth. So this is a time when my metal rib comes into play, and I spend a little time with really cleaning up and wiping down any surfaces, any little pieces of clay that are hanging out, and in spending some time with cleanup before I turn it back over. If I have to walk away from my piece, I might choose to wrap it with plastic on top of the bowl. Kind of depends. If it feels like it's sort of hanging in space a little too much, then I probably wouldn't do that. I would store it upright. But if you have more of a bowl shape, you've done more overlap with your template, then you might want to have it suspended for a little bit if you have to walk away from it. Just something to consider. And again, cleaning this up. I'm only going to do a little bit of cleanup here on camera, but I want to show you that I really want you to keep these edges and this thickness. I don't want this to get blended down in or smushed or any of that. So we're keeping this edge because it's really beautiful what happens with a glaze when it flows over these edges and fills and pools in some of the seams. Okay, so you're going to continue to clean. I'm turning my guy over just to give you final instruction. Again, coming in on the inside, doing all the cleanup in here. Again, my best smoothing tool is my metal rib. Getting in there. And just being careful that you don't overwork the edges to the point where you're kind of fighting a losing battle, where it's just getting wobbly and you try to fix it and it's wobblier. If that's happening to you, you need to walk away for a minute. And then come back and see what you've got. So cleaning all of this up, I would continue to use my wooden stick as well for a lot of that cleanup. You can get in there in corners and in small places that it's probably very hard to do otherwise. Okay, and get all of that cleanup going on. I want to press down on the inside and make sure it's sitting nice and flat, because right now my clay is really wet, so it will sit on the table and kind of not flop around. But as this starts to become leather hard, and especially when it's getting ready to go bone dry and get fired, you don't want to have a piece that's wobbling around. So make sure you've pressed that inside 3-inch area down against your surface so you have it. And then from here, you're going to add texture and design. So remember, you can be taking away bits of clay with any of your tools. You can draw a design in the surface and have kind of carved in things going on. That's what those are. Make sure you clean them very well. You don't want to have any little bits of clay stuck in your carved areas. or you can do positive, negative space. I wouldn't do this at this stage. I would finish all of my cleanup and then wrap it, let it firm up maybe overnight. And then the next day when it's leather hard, nice medium leather hard, then mark out all of your patterns that you want to do, anything that you want to cut through. And I highly recommend that you use your clean out tool and use the little dagger end. You'll be able to get in, push in, and draw straight across. So if I wanted to put a little triangle in the end of this, even though it's soft, just so you can see, push your tool in and cut straight. Don't saw in and out. If you saw in and out, you're gonna get little marks from that. So if I go straight to where I wanna go, remove my tool, and then push in and again, slide across. And then I'm gonna take out the piece that I've cut, hopefully. If I got all the way to the corners, which I don't know that I did. And remove that piece. Again, my clay is really soft. This is not the optimum time to be doing this. But just so you can kind of see what I was talking about, you'll have some cleanup to do, but you can cut a little piece out and have a nice, interesting shape that when you set it on the table, this is gonna capture someone's attention and be a noticeable little design. And you can do that anywhere on your piece that you would like. Okay, have some fun with the surface design and texture.